Hello and welcome to TRT World's continued coverage of the US election, live from outside Capitol Hill. I'm Melinda Nusafora.
And I'm Jafar Hassan. The countdown is now on. In less than a week, Americans will cast their votes in an election that has implications far beyond the United States, and the race could not be any tighter.
Jafar, over the next half hour, we'll look at campaign trash talk, specifically why the word garbage is threatening to derail election messaging on both sides of the political divide. But first, here are our main headlines.
A fresh round of Israeli strikes have hit Gaza. At least 40 Palestinians have been killed across the enclave just on Wednesday. 6 of them were killed in an airstrike on tents housing displaced families in Deir el-Balah early on Wednesday. These attacks come as no food or medical aid has entered northern Gaza for 4 weeks amid an Israeli siege of the area.
In Lebanon, Israel has issued an evacuation order for residents of the Lebanese city of Baalbek. Earlier, at least 14 people were killed by Israeli strikes near the southern Lebanese city of Sidon. State media reports that Israeli tanks have entered the outskirts of the village of Haim, their deepest incursion yet into southern Lebanon in a ground operation launched last month.
More than 70 people have been killed in floods triggered by torrential rain in eastern Spain. Roads and towns were flooded after the storm began on Tuesday, dropping a year's worth of rain in hours, causing rivers to quickly burst their banks. Authorities had no option but to cut off rail services around Valencia. They have also advised citizens to stay at home and avoid all non-essential travel.
And the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan is meeting his British counterpart in London. Fidan said Turkey and the UK need to work on a number of challenges which both countries are mutually interested in. He also added that long strategic partnerships pave the way for increased cooperation.
Welcome back. We are now on a final and frenetic home stretch in the race for the White House. Presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are offering sharply contrasting visions for America's future. With closing arguments delivered, both candidates are now blitzing the battleground swing states with just 6 days until the election. Neil Giardino reports.
In her closeout rally, Kamala Harris chose a location steeped in significance: the White House ellipse. Here in 2021, Donald Trump held his own rally before droves of his supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol building.
And sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol to overturn the will of the people in a free and fair election. An election that he knew he lost.
Harris used the backdrop to warn Americans about a democracy in peril and urged voters to once and for all close the chapter on Donald Trump and an era of tribal politics.
America, for too long, we have been consumed with too much division, chaos, and mutual distrust. And it can be easy then to forget a simple truth. It doesn't have to be this way. It is time for a new generation of leadership in America.
Harris's rally drew tens of thousands, though not all were there in a show of support. Hundreds turned up to protest her administration's policy on the war in Gaza.
There's a lot going on. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Meanwhile, fallout is spreading over racist remarks made at the Trump rally in New York on Sunday. From battleground Pennsylvania, Trump sought to move past the mounting controversy.
Nobody loves our Latino community and our Puerto Rican community more than I do. Nobody. Yeah, it's interesting because I've done more for Puerto Rico than any president by far. Nobody close.
But the so-called joke could come back to haunt Republicans. Puerto Rican voters make up the second largest Latino group in the country. Nearly 480,000 residents of Puerto Rican descent live in Pennsylvania, with over 600,000 eligible Latino voters in the state. President Biden now drawing unwanted attention on himself in the final days of the race. In response to the racist remarks against Puerto Ricans, Biden swiping back, calling Trump's supporters garbage. At his Pennsylvania rally, Trump pouncing on the comment.
Remember Hillary, she said deplorable? Garbage, I think, is worse, right?
With over 50 million ballots already cast, both candidates are again charging battleground states to shore up turnout in the final stretch of an excruciatingly tight race. Neil Giardino, TRT World.
John Brain is outside the White House in Washington, D.C., and he joins us now. John, over the past 24 hours, two vastly different speeches from the candidates, two very different visions for America.
Two very different visions of America indeed. Kamala Harris is basically saying, follow me and I'll lead you to the sunny uplands where we all live in harmony and prosperity, and I'll work with my political opponents to make your lives better. Whereas for Donald Trump, it's follow me and I'll protect you. I'll protect you from the dark forces which are threatening you and our nation. And of course, his symbol of that is the hordes of illegal immigrants, as he describes them, including rapists and murderers. So the question is, which of those two visions will resonate with undecided voters? Because that ultimately is what will decide this election. And going around the country, you do get that feeling that people say, apart from Trump's loyal supporters, they say, well, we don't really like Donald Trump, but we do like his policies, and we know what we're getting with Trump. And of course, if you don't know what you're getting with Trump, you haven't been listening for the last 10 years, because his message has never changed. Kamala Harris's challenge is that she is still something of an unknown quantity. She's only been on the high-profile scene of this campaign for the last few months. People still don't know exactly what she stands for. Is she pro-fracking? Is she anti-fracking? Will she change the Biden administration's policy on Israel and Gaza, or will it remain the same? People really don't know. So voters, or those undecided voters, feel they'd be taking more of a gamble with her because she is that unknown quantity.
John, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the word garbage. You know, before coming for our broadcast, I was watching local television here in the United States, and it is still making headlines across the U.S. Why is that the case? It's been days since the comedian made that joke.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Well, it's extraordinary, isn't it? This is a comedian no one's really heard of, even in America. He's not exactly a household name. But it's really because this election is so close. These swing states are so close. Trump and the Republicans have been making real inroads into the Latino community, a community which traditionally supported the Democrats and still does by a majority. But Trump has been eroding that majority to a degree. And of course, to make a comment like this, even though it wasn't Trump himself, that puts at risk those gains he's been making among Latinos. And it wouldn't take many of them who've decided had decided they were going to vote for Trump to then switch the other way to make a real impact in Pennsylvania. And if Trump wins Pennsylvania, he basically wins the election, because no Democrat has lost Pennsylvania and still won since 1948. So it's critical. It just shows the tight margins that this race is swinging on.
Well, economic policies could decide who wins the swing state of Wisconsin. Polls show that the #1 concern for voters there are gas and groceries, with the prices of both continuing to rise. Inflation has started to drop across the country in the weeks before the election, but will it be enough for Kamala Harris to win the state and stop Donald Trump from returning to the White House? TRT World's Andy Rojan sent us this report.
Welcome to Wisconsin. It's peaceful yet polarized. A state that became politically divided faster than the rest of the nation, and where most voters care more about feelings than issues. And for Donald Trump supporters, that feeling exploded on July 13th when he survived an assassination attempt.
I felt that renewed energy around him, but the vibe is that people are getting behind Trump and want to support him, and they're proud to do it.
A week later, the Democrats saw their feelings explode when President Joe Biden dropped out of the race and Kamala Harris stepped in. And they really noticed it at this weekly corner gathering of Democrats.
This corner changed completely. That this place was on fire that Tuesday. So you ask about, has there been a change? I can tell you, it was dramatic.
So enthusiastic are Democrats now for Harris here at the party headquarters that the most obvious vulnerability for Trump, the fact that he's a convicted felon, is barely mentioned. Years ago, pollsters say you could get 20% of Wisconsin voters to switch political sides based on actual issues. Nowadays, maybe 5% will switch sides. So the goal at both Republican and Democratic Party headquarters is to just get their own supporters enthusiastic enough to get out and vote. For Trump fans, it's the belief that his assassination attempts prove he's important.
The enthusiasm has been amazing. Every day we're busy. We're getting a lot of donations.
A few weeks ago,
Hillary Clinton never campaigned at all in Wisconsin during the 2016 race and lost the state to Trump. So for Harris fans, it's the fact that she is showing up.
I've been to 2 of her rallies so far. You can sense a new enthusiasm.
Still, for better or worse, pollsters say Trump alone dominates the Wisconsin race now, with the state's voters either loving him or hating him, and both emotions incredibly intense.
They say that Wisconsin is...
Polls show Trump is underwater in Wisconsin. That's more unpopular than popular by about 11 percentage points. Harris is underwater too by about 3 points. So will simply being less unpopular be enough to win Wisconsin? Andy Roschem, TRT World.
For more on this, let's bring in TRT World's Randolph Nogill. He joins me live from Los Angeles. Randy, good to see you. So as you speak with voters feeling the strain of rising prices on essentials like gas and groceries, do they believe the recent dip in inflation will be enough to sway their vote in favor of Kamala Harris, or are they looking for more immediate relief?
Well, certainly this year we've seen inflation rise, really soar by more than 20%. So a momentary dip in inflation is unlikely to allay those fears. Certainly the economy and inflation, chief of all, is really a massive issue on voters' minds. And it's really felt by people on the lower end of the spectrum. Certainly those people that are buying basic necessities like milk and laundry detergent, those rise in prices are going to hit them harder because those basics take up a larger percentage of their paycheck. So certainly that issue is highly being paid attention to. People are certainly voting on that issue, but how they'll vote really depends on how they interpret the causes of inflation. Some of them, of course, link it to immigration, and that's certainly been a message that's been driven home by the Trump campaign, blaming immigrants for everything from lack of security to problems in the economy. Now, there are certainly those that believe that immigration, particularly in a place like Los Angeles, which has a third of its population are immigrants and a number of undocumented immigrants. There are some who would think that those immigrants are undocumented immigrants are perhaps taking more government services, not contributing, taking jobs. But the overwhelming amount of data on this issue suggests that immigrants, by and large, they produce or they give $500 billion in tax revenue to the U.S. government annually. That's every $6 of tax that's paid, an immigrant accounts for $1 of that. And undocumented immigrants contribute $35 billion. Some studies show $35 billion a year they contribute despite taking less government services. So the argument on the other side, particularly in a place like LA, as I mentioned, a number of undocumented immigrants, a third of the population, immigrant as part of the immigrant community, business owners contributing massively to the workforce. So certainly it's an issue that how you interpret it, what you attribute as the causes of economic stagnation or a lack of jobs in certain sectors, it's all about interpretation.
Randy, we've been talking a lot about the Latin vote today, and as you mentioned there, migrants, whether they're documented or undocumented. What sense are you getting in LA that the Latin vote and immigration is going to be an issue on people's minds as they head to the polls next Tuesday?
Well, Melinda, it's worth noting that 30 years ago, in 1994, there was a law, a proposition passed in the city, Proposition 187, that essentially made it really difficult for illegal immigrants, for undocumented immigrants, I should say, to really assimilate, to take part in society. And since then, over the last 30 years, Los Angeles has been really at the forefront of trying to integrate immigrants, to use them in their workforce, essentially, the problem being is that there is no practical means of mass deportation. That would be a very difficult thing to undertake. So getting them settled, allowing them to contribute is really one of the main things that LA has been a driver in. And certainly people here, particularly among the Latino community, they want to see a greater integration. And with the threat of a new presidential administration coming into power that might seek to deport more people, to undertake a massive deportation campaign, many want this city to be a sanctuary city, essentially protected from federal authorities, protected from deportation by federal authorities.
Now, both candidates have been courting the Latino vote in recent weeks, who could decide the outcome of the election. Polls have suggested Donald Trump was the preferred candidate among the group, and Vice President Kamala Harris has been losing Latino voters to former President Donald Trump, especially in the swing state of Nevada. But how much will a joke made by a comedian at a Donald Trump rally on Sunday, which called Puerto Rico a garbage island, affect the Latino vote? TRT World's Marowitz reports.
Former President Donald Trump has called Hispanic immigrants rapists and murderers. He has promised to deport at least 15 million undocumented people. Still, the former president is doing better with U.S. Latinos than any other Republican in decades. According to a New York Times Siena poll conducted in October, Vice President Kamala Harris is leading with Hispanics by only 56%. The last Democrat to fall below 60% with Latino voters was John Kerry, who lost the presidential race in 2004. These gains by Republicans can swing outcomes in battleground states, including in Nevada, which has one of the biggest Latino communities in the nation. Harris is also struggling with Hispanic men, like undecided voter Robert Hernandez. The restaurant manager is not troubled by Trump's tough immigration stance, despite his own parents being immigrants.
I certainly understand. I know where my parents came from. I get it. But I also understand the security of the actual border, you know, so I try to look at it from a broad perspective as to what's really right.
It's clear that any path to victory for Harris and Trump will require tapping into this powerful voting bloc, who make up about 1 in every 5 registered voters in this state.
In the state's largest city, Las Vegas, thousands of Latinos work in the gambling hub's numerous hotels and casinos. Many are part of the powerful Culinary Workers Union, which is spending millions of dollars on a get-out-to-vote drive for Harris. Hotel worker and union member Arturo Maya, like many Hispanics, is offended by Trump's rhetoric.
I am insulted by him, because we have come from Latin America and have come here to contribute, not to beg or take. We come here to work.
Still, there's a lot of anger at Democrats for the state's economic condition. Nevada has the highest unemployment rate out of any state in the country. In the predominantly Hispanic suburb of North Las Vegas, both housing prices and poverty levels have soared. At a Latino Americans for Trump meeting, homemaker Ashley Flores said that it was Trump's economic message that most appealed to her and other Latinos.
Trump is someone who is a man of values, a man of faith, someone who keeps his word. He might be a jerk, people don't like him, I don't care. He resolves. So how do I identify with him? With finances, with the economy.
As Election Day approaches, most polls show Trump and Harris running neck and neck in Nevada. That is going to put a lot of pressure on the political parties in this swing state to mobilize their voters and have a high turnout, especially among the state's Hispanic voters. Marowitz, TRT World, Las Vegas, Nevada.
Javier Farque is a Latin American analyst and joins us now from London. Javier, thanks for your time. With an anti-immigration message being such a key issue in the Trump campaign, why do you think it is that he's resonating with the Latino community?
Because many Latinos, not everybody, many Latinos see immigration as a threat for the very jobs they actually do, especially in the agricultural sector. They see it as a competition, which means that they don't want any more immigrants, even though they are really second generation of immigrants or immigrants themselves. So they see this element of competition. Second, because Trump has promised to deregulate the markets and to promote sort of economic growth, they believe that immigration could put in jeopardy that plan, which would benefit many Latinos as they see it in the United States. So that's one of the reasons why they see Trump as an alternative in terms of his anti-immigration policies. In that respect, you will see that, for example, in many states, which has a huge number of Latino undocumented immigrants, when the local Latino population, the ones who have papers, the ones who are sort of legal, between inverted commas, sort of living there, would prefer not to have more immigrants from their own region, from their own continent.
Javier, stay with us. Our producer, Ilyas Abdi, he went out on the streets here in Washington, D.C. to ask this very question to the locals. Why are people here in the United States, why is Donald Trump gaining more ground with Latinos in the country? And here's what they told him.
Really stand by, support Trump, especially after the things he said and the way he's talking about mass deportations, stuff like that. You know, it's another thing to enforce the laws, another thing to just say we're going to start rounding up people and sitting down.
Personally, I'm not speaking for everyone else, but personally, last 3.5 years, we're sitting there in Texas like, what's going on? Where's she at? What's she doing? She's not doing anything for us.
Now, Javier, with Donald Trump seemingly gaining ground among Latino voters, how much damage could comments like the one calling Puerto Rico a garbage island really do? Is this a deal breaker for those on the fence, or will the policy stakes override the rhetoric?
Not a deal breaker, because they're so tied together in the opinion polls. This could make a difference, especially in the swing states. Now, your correspondent mentioned Arizona. We have to mention Pennsylvania, a swing state which is a mass swing state. Now, more than 620,000 Puerto Ricans live in Pennsylvania, and also 1 million people there claim themselves as Latinos. This could make a difference. The Democrats won this state in 2020 by 1.17% of the vote. That was a very tight win. So this joke, between inverted commas, that was made offending many Puerto Ricans could make the huge difference to keep Pennsylvania in the hands of the Democrats. We mustn't forget as well that Latinos tend to follow the trend of the states where they live. Florida has always voted Republicans for ideological reasons, the Cuban-American community, etc. Whereas, for example, California has voted always Democrats, traditionally Democrats. But it is the swing states, Arizona and Pennsylvania, particularly Pennsylvania, which could be crucial in terms of how the Puerto Rican vote will influence. However, some organizations, some media organizations have been doing sort of interviews with Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, and they said, look, we're not so much concerned about this joke, we are more concerned about the economy, and they might be prepared to forget the joke. But we don't know yet, because everything is so tight, and since Pennsylvania is one of the swing states which has to be won, that could make a difference in terms of the general vote of the Latinos in the United States.
Now, the US relationship with Saudi Arabia remains a global issue ahead of the election, especially with the possibility of the normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia on the horizon. So with this evolving alliance, could it shape both countries' political and strategic priorities? Nazar Sadawi has this report.
For decades, U.S.-Saudi relations have been central to American Middle East policy, based on oil interests and security cooperation. Under Trump, ties strengthened with $8 billion in arms sales and support for Saudi Arabia's anti-Iran stance. The Biden administration has maintained the partnership, but shifted focus to human rights and reassessed military support, particularly over Saudi involvement in Yemen. The Palestinian issue remains unresolved.
The kingdom will not cease its relentless efforts towards the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. We also affirm that the kingdom will not establish diplomatic relations with Israel without that.
As oil and security remain central, normalizing relations with Israel is a U.S. priority. For Biden and Harris, securing this deal before the election could enhance their foreign policy credentials. Saudi Arabia, however, insists any deal must address the Palestinian issue.
Given all the work that we've done, the United States has done, with Saudi Arabia over the last year in terms of what would be required between us, given the fact that both Israel and Saudi Arabia, in conversations with us, have expressed clearly that this is something I'd like to pursue, I think if we can get a ceasefire in Gaza, there remains an opportunity through the balance of this administration to move forward on normalization.
Israel's war on Gaza complicates these efforts. Saudi Arabia is open to aiding Gaza's reconstruction, but insists progress on Palestinian statehood is needed for a formal deal. Trump, who strengthened ties during his presidency, may seek to leverage this in his campaign.
Saudi Arabia has made very clear that as part of any normalization deal with Israel, they have two requirements. One, calm in Gaza, and two, a path to an independent Palestinian state.
The stakes are high. A successful normalization deal could secure Biden's legacy, while a Trump victory could revive a more transactional dynamic building on the Abraham Accords. For Saudi Arabia, strong ties with Washington are crucial for security, energy, and infrastructure.
The kingdom also seeks to promote regional and international peace and security by exerting efforts and pursuing political solutions to crises in Yemen, Sudan, Libya, and others, in addition to supporting solutions to international crises such as the Russian-Ukrainian conflict.
The coming months will be pivotal for U.S.-Saudi relations and broader Middle East dynamics, with significant implications for the U.S. elections and global stability. Nizar Sadawi, TRT World.
And this is going to be a tight race until the very end.
For more on this, let's bring in Mark Marowitz. He is from the State University of New York Maritime College. Mark, great to have you here with us on TRT World. So with the potential normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel on the table, how much will this shift the U.S.'s approach in the region? And is this alliance more about genuine diplomacy, or is there something else to it?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to clear the air on this, because all these discussions on foreign policy are completely moot and not significant a few days before the election. No one in the electorate is thinking about these issues. The policymakers are thinking about it, but voters are not thinking about it. They're thinking about the economy and jobs and prices at the supermarket and gas station prices. They're not thinking of this. I assure you that whoever becomes president of the United States, whether it's Harris or Trump, there will not be such a marked difference between them when it comes to the issue that you related, that is the Saudi-U.S. relationship or the Middle East policy, or for that matter, Ukraine, you name it. I don't believe it. I think that the main issue in the Middle East today is Iran, and the United States will not countenance, and that's Harris, Biden, Trump, you name it, will not allow Iran to continue to raise the specter of violence in the world. We're at a watershed here, but the election puts all these issues on hold. There is zero chance of a U.S.-Saudi rapprochement before the election. I would say not even zero. The big issues are domestic politics, and also there are some issues floating out there, like you spent time talking about this issue on Puerto Rico, which is a non-issue, because the fact is Hispanics in the United States are a diverse community from many communities around the world. There are Cubans who in Florida support Trump. There are Puerto Ricans who support Trump, many different diversities of Hispanics. The point that was made by the speaker at the rally was terrible, but the Trump campaign disavowed it. That's not an issue. The only issue in this campaign is to try to figure out what these candidates stand for. We can't really figure out what Harris stands for. Trump, we kind of know what he stands for, but the problem is that Harris just became the candidate a few months ago. We really don't know her. Trump and Harris are spending their time throwing darts at each other, attacking each other personally. Harris calling Trump a fascist and likening him to a Nazi, and all these terrible things which don't tell you or give you an indication as to what they are going to do if they get into office. Now, I would say what's important about our discussion is that before the election, the focus is on domestic politics. Absolutely. Once the election takes place, there will be a flip to foreign policy. Why? Because we have a crisis ongoing in the Middle East. We have a crisis in Europe with Ukraine. Whoever is the president-elect is going to have to get going right away to look at those issues. They can't really wait to January 20th to start dealing with these. Obviously, situation Gaza, Lebanon, Middle East, Iran, terrible situation. Ukraine, Europe, Russia, awful situation. And we didn't even talk about Asia, the relationship between China and the United States and Taiwan. The president-elect is going to have to focus on that. Obviously, on the American economy, yes. But right now, it's President Clinton's statement, it's the economy, stupid. What does that mean? Economy, economy, economy. When people go to the ballot box, that's what they're worried about. Who is going to help me going forward with the economy? Who is going to help my job, help my career, and lower my prices at the gas station, at the supermarket? The rest of it, they're not going to the ballot box. They're thinking, oh, gee, I don't know. What is the president going to do about Ukraine? No, right now, Americans focusing on the local side, on the economy side. After the presidency, November 5th, when the election takes place,
we are looking at live pictures now, I believe, of the Donald Trump rally in North Carolina as the countdown is on. Last week we're into now. It's the final stretch, Jafar.
Indeed it is, and we're also seeing Kamala Harris in North Carolina, a very important day, but here on TRT World we'll be keeping our audience up to speed with all the latest developments taking place in U.S. elections. So before we go, you want to remind our audience what's for them on the 4th of November?
Indeed, because we have a lot ahead for you. Don't forget that TRT World will be ramping up its rolling coverage starting on the 4th of November. We'll be broadcasting from multiple locations across the globe.
We will be bringing you live updates, key figures and diverse perspectives on how this U.S. election will impact the world. And with that, it is goodbye from us and our team here in Washington.
Bye.